everyone. Welcome to our end of year webinar. Man, I swear every December I look around thinking, how are we here already?
No.
It feels like year end is like that coworker that shows up to the Christmas party early.
Super early.
You're still trying to get things together and then suddenly, it's happening whether you're ready or not. So today we're going to dive into all of the greatest hits of all of the year-end fun. We're going to talk about W-2s and 1099s, 1095s, and of course this shiny new thing everybody keeps talking about,
the one big beautiful bill.
Yes, but don't worry. We're going to walk you through it all. We're going to hopefully clear up all the confusion and hopefully make this year's wrap-up feel a little less like chaos and a little more like, well, organized chaos. But if it's up to me and Stephanie, maybe some holiday themed chaos. We're the holiday elves in our office. So, but before we get started, we do have a brief disclaimer. This presentation is for your information only. It has our opinions, and this presentation is proprietary. And then a few housekeeping items here. At this point, you should be hearing audio, but if you can't hear me, then hopefully you're frantically turning up your speakers or switching to a different device. Hopefully this is your reminder to get all of that going and troubleshooting before we get started. At the end of the session though, give us your feedback. We want to know how we did. The slides and the recordings, those are all going to be sent to you via email after the session. And then finally, please interact with us today using the questions panel. Since many people have registered, we're going to answer as many questions as we can during the session, but anything that we can't get to, we'll make sure to follow up. So let's kick off by introducing ourselves. I know I've worked with a lot of you, but I know that we have some new folks in the room with us today. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Elizabeth Hudspeth. I work on the implementation team here at Accountingware. But in my time before Accountingware, I was a former payroll administrator and an HR manager. So I like to think that I bring to the table some experience from your shoes. I understand the intensity of hitting those payroll deadlines and the tax deadlines. So if anybody ever needs a shoulder to cry on or a motivational high five or a virtual hug, I got you. Then beside me, I have Stephanie. She is our support team leader. So Steph, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Elizabeth. So hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie Rosales. I've been with Accountingware for several years now, and I currently serve as the team lead for our support department. So payroll is definitely not my area of expertise, so I leave that to Elizabeth. But I do work in all of our other packages, including accounts payable. So today I'll be walking you through the full 1099 process from start to finish so that you'll be ready and prepared to tackle 1099s. But I wanted to mention a couple of things. I'm really happy to be here again with you, Elizabeth, for our year-end webinar. I think this is our second or third time doing this exact webinar for the year-end, but I'm even more excited because this is our first webinar in our new Conetrix headquarters.
That's right, yes.
So we recently moved into our new location about 2 weeks ago, and we are so excited to be in our new space, presenting from this beautiful new studio. And here is a sneak peek of the outside of our new headquarters. And if you stay tuned, you'll get to see a look of the inside at the end of the webinar. So now quickly, I'm going to go ahead and cover our agenda for the day. We're going to start off by going over the IRS electronic filing requirements. And then we're going to dive into everything we know about the one big beautiful bill. We'll then move on to the 1099 processing, followed by the W-2 processing, and finally ACA processing. So we have a lot to cover and not a whole lot of time. So Elizabeth, do you want to go ahead and get us started with the IRS electronic filing?
Sure. Thanks, Stephanie. So last week, you all should have gotten an email from me that looked like this. If you didn't get it, reach out, let me know. I'll be glad to forward it to you, or just let us know down in the chat, hey, I didn't get this, and we'll make sure somebody sends it off. But thankfully, this year, there were no changes to the electronic filing requirement. A few years ago, they changed it to if your company had 10 or more information forms filed per company, then you are required to file electronically, and that has not changed. They've kept something the same. So if you have been filing electronically, then perfect. Then you shouldn't have anything else that you need to do. That is, though, unless you've been logging into the BSO with an old legacy user ID. We'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. But hopefully you're all set up and ready to go. In fact, even if you don't have more than 10, we still highly encourage you to go ahead and file electronically. We give you all the tools to do this. And I promise you, it's not near as scary as I think you might think it is. And there is still time to apply to both the Business Services Online, which we refer to as the BSO. That's going to be where you submit your W-2s. And then the FIRE system is going to be where you submit your 1099s. So this email right here, it's going to walk you through all of the steps of how to apply for your TCC codes for both of those systems. This is the last year that the IRS will be supporting FIRE, though. So next year, they're going to be transitioning over to the IRIS system, and therefore so will we. We're already in the process of developing that submission, but we're not quite ready for that for this tax filing year. So make sure that if you're new to this, that you request a FIRE TCC code and not an IRIS TCC code, at least for this year. So Stephanie, I'm going to let you Stephanie's going to talk about that a little bit more later. So basically, there are a couple of key points that I want to point out just from this email alone. So the first thing is Business Services Online has completely transitioned over to the new login.gov or the ID.me accounts. So it's those old legacy BSO logins like GFK38FT. Those are no longer active. So if you've still been using those, please make sure to transition yourself over now, and please, please, please don't wait until filing time. Just get it done. So the next thing is going to be your 1099s. Those need to be filed through FIRE this year, and IRIS will be next year. And lastly, with both of these systems, just log in early. The earlier, the better. Make sure that your user is active and it's ready to accept forms. Save yourself from any last-minute panic moments that happen because you can't get in. Luckily, you still have time to apply for both of these systems. Most of the time, it takes a minimum of 2 weeks to complete this process, sometimes longer, so just don't wait. And remember, if you need this email, let me know in the chat. Let somebody in our chat know. I think we've got Brett doing questions for us today, so let them know, and we'll make sure we get that forwarded to you. Okay, so before we dive too far into year end, we probably need to take a moment and address the biggest elephant in the room this year. And you guessed it, that's
the one big beautiful bill.
This new legislation, it includes several payroll related tax credits that employees may qualify for. And I know that all of you have been patiently waiting for our plan on how to comply with these new regulations. So let's talk about it. Here's what we know right now. The One Big Beautiful Bill introduced 2 new deductions beginning in 2025 that affect employee taxes. However, it's not affecting employer payroll taxes. So nothing's going to change from your side, at least as far as what you're paying in taxes. So let's talk about just the basics first. No tax on overtime provision applies only to Fair Labor Standards Act defined overtime, FLSA defined overtime, meaning any hours worked over 40 in a week. And even then, that's only the premium portion. So we're going to talk more about that here in a second. This does not apply to state-specific overtime rules. I'm looking at you, California. We have to talk about something else for you guys. It does not include union provisions. It does not include any type of special agreements. Those are not eligible, and we have to figure out a way to carve those wages out. Now, from the employee perspective, employees, they can deduct up to $12,500 individually, or if they file jointly, $25,000. This impacts only federal income tax only. It does not include FICA. So next, let's talk about no tax on tips deduction. This applies to employees working in IRS-defined, customarily tipped occupations. That list is yet to officially be released yet, but once that's released, that list is going to be published on the IRS website. As soon as I know more, I'll try to get that information out to you as well. So those employees, they can deduct up to $25,000 individually or $50,000 jointly. And again, this does not reduce your Social Security or Medicare. It only applies to federal tax. So at the end of the day, a key point for our employers is that there are no changes to the 2025 W-2 layout. The IRS has already said that they recognize that this legislation, it came very late in the year, so there will be a period of administrative forgiveness, and they have granted transition penalty relief for 2025. In other words, they're not expecting employers to magically reverse engineer 12 months of data with brand new rules that didn't exist yet, meaning employers, they're not going to be penalized if they don't separately report qualified overtime or tip amounts this year. Those new reporting fields will arrive on the 2026 W-2 form, so not for this filing season. But, and this is a big but, even though employers aren't required to submit them, we all know that employees are absolutely going to want to claim these credits when they file their own personal returns. And that just means that they'll need accurate totals. So our focus from an ActivityHD standpoint is giving you a clean and a consistent way to pull the relevant wage data out of the system. So let's talk about that next.
Okay.
As we said earlier, the W-2 itself did not change for the tax year. There's not a new box, there's no new federal codes, and there's nothing that the IRS is requiring employers to report. However, your employees, they're going to need certain wage details if they choose to claim this on their personal tax return. So let's face it, we know that they want to do that. We also know that you, as the employer, you do not want to be hand building reports every time someone asks you for their overtime credit amount. So starting in version 9.16 or later, as part of our preparation for the One Big Beautiful Bill, ActivityHD is now going to include 2 optional reporting groups. And it's a mouthful. So excuse me, OBBBA overtime and OBBBA tips. Those are the 2 new groups. These are going to help you provide employees with the information that they're going to need, and if they choose to claim these new deductions on their tax returns. We believe that for most employers, adding this information to box 14 will be the easiest and the least administrative option, which is why these 2 groups were added. This is going to streamline your totals to the W-2 so you can supply these totals automatically without building custom reports or doing any manual calculations. So let's focus on overtime first. Under the OBBB, One Big Beautiful Bill, only the portion of overtime that is mandated by the Fair Labor Standards Act is considered qualified overtime compensation. That means out of the time and a half for overtime, only the and a half is what qualifies for the deduction. Okay, so for example here, if someone is paid, just for easy math, $10 at their regular rate, then their time and a half is $15, right? So only the $5 for that hour is what qualifies here. It's not the full $15, and it does not count for double time either, since double time is not technically FLSA mandated. If they are in double time because of a union requirement or a special agreement, still only the halftime counts, and that's if that particular time would have fallen under FLSA mandated time anyway. So in this example, if they were paid double time instead of overtime, only 1/4 of that amount, that $5, represents the halftime component and is considered qualified overtime. So in ActivityHD, the OBBBA overtime amount, it now reflects only the FLSA mandated halftime portion. That group is going to do that calculation for you. If your payroll structure is standard, meaning your overtime allows only for FLSA time and a half time rule, and it's cleanly recorded in your OT group, then ActivityHD can determine the halftime premium directly from those overtime earnings. However, if your company uses anything else, if they use comp time, incentive-based overtime, shift premiums, any type of special multiplier, or anything else that goes above and beyond that FLSA minimum requirement, ActivityHD just can't determine that it was FLSA required halftime portion just from the raw earning codes. So in those cases, you're going to need to assign the qualified amount manually to a stat code included with that OBBBA overtime group so that the correct value is going to flow to box 14. So coming back to this slide here, the last thing that I want to point out to you is to verify sorry, my brain stopped working for a second. The last thing I want to point out right here is that we also included a proof qualified overtime export control. It's going to be available in your extras, so you can audit exactly what's going to be on your W-2s before you actually get to W-2 processing. For those of you who might want to take it one step further, you can utilize the payroll group analysis report to review individually elsewhere. So for tips, the OBBA tips group, it's going to allow you to track voluntary reported tips. That's the only type that qualifies for this new deduction. Any type of mandatory service charges, those are going to be excluded by the law. Any type of stipends, those are excluded by the law. Together with these two groups, these updates hopefully are going to give you a clear and compliant method for reporting the amounts your employees are going to need without altering your W-2 workflow and without adding too much administrative burden to your year-end process as well. And I won't lie, I mean, as a company, this was a really complex process. It was so much more than simply no tax on overtime and no tax on tips. I mean, right. I don't know how many hours I spent reading and discussing and brainstorming all of the best processes to make sure that we could accurately provide you with some sound data to submit to your employees. So we tried to catch the majority of our sites so that at the end of the day, fewer sites would have to create those manual checks with stat codes, but we know it's not going to be perfect, and we know that we're going to have to work through it. But anyway, that's enough for now. As we know more, we will make sure to pass down any additional information as it comes from the IRS. So Stephanie, I think I'm going to turn it over to you now to get us on to 1099.
Yep, I'll let you have a little break because I know that was a lot to go over. So let's talk about how we can prepare for our 1099 processing. Now, here's a quick look just so you can see the dates for your deadlines to file. And if you want, you can go to our help text and just search end of year, and you'll be able to pull all of these dates up. Okay, so let's talk about AP codes and how they are the foundation for 1099s and ActivityHD. So without the AP codes, you cannot generate your 1099s. Default AP codes are assigned on the vendor record on the defaults tab, as you can see here. And when an invoice is created for that vendor, the AP code is defaulted onto your invoices, which then flow to your payment records once the invoice is paid. The 1099 reportable amounts from the payment history are then added to your forms at the end of the year. So you're going to want to review your vendors to make sure you are not missing any AP codes. Okay. Now let's talk about how you can review your 2025 1099 data. We recommend that you start by proofing with the 1099 detail report. You can find this in the reports folder under accounts payable, and you can run this report anytime throughout the year using the different reporting options that we have available. This report can help you find potential inaccuracies in your data, such as missing tax IDs or reporting addresses, missing AP codes, errors in reporting amounts, and vendors with 1099 amounts that should not be reportable. So now let's look at ways we can run the 1099 detail report. First, we're going to use the report to look for vendors with validation errors. Start by pulling up the 1099 detail report, and on the detail tab, set the dates to the current year and check all of the boxes for the different return types. Now on the options tab, check only show vendors with validation errors and then preview your report. If you have any issues as seen here, don't worry, you can fix them and then rerun your report to make sure you have everything corrected. Just remember that running this report will not include vendors if they do not have a 2025 payment flagged with an AP code. which is why I encourage you to go ahead and review your vendors separately. So now let's make sure that the 1099 payments are correct. We're going to run that same 1099 detail report, but this time you're going to change your selection on the options tab. Check mark the include payment detail box, and then you can preview the report. This is a great way to see if you have any vendor payments that are flagged for reporting that shouldn't be. If you only want to see vendors that have met the minimum threshold, then check the box apply minimum amount limits. And then in this report, you will see all of the detail included for all of the invoice amounts that are set as reportable. So again, this report will only show you payments that are currently flagged with an AP code for being reportable in the system. So how do we prove our invoices? One way is to use your invoice GL detail folder. From here, you can review the invoice details from your service or rent related expense accounts by using invoice dates and account filters. If you see an invoice that you need to review, just double click on that detail line to open the record, and you'll find a blue little folder that will take you right to that invoice. Another view in ActivityHD that you can use is the invoice AP codes folder. That's located under the invoice folder. This will show all of the invoices that are flagged with an AP code. And then add the AP code column and the basis column to your view. Use a column filter on your invoice dates just to see 2025. And then you can review from the view, or you can select all of your invoices and copy them out to Excel if that makes it easier for you. You can also run the invoice AP codes listing report from this view located at the top. Just be sure on the sorting tab that you add vendor to the assigned sort options, as well as add vendor to the subtotal level. Here is an example of what that report looks like. Before looking at how to correct an AP code on invoices and payments, here's a quick recap on where to fix common errors found on the vendor records. If you need to add a missing tax ID number, you can open up the vendor record, and on the vendor tab, you'll find the federal ID field. For missing or incorrect reporting addresses, click on the locations tab and then open up that location record. Here you can update the address and also make sure that it's marked for reporting. And then finally, for missing or incorrect AP codes, click on the defaults tab and add the AP code at the bottom. Just make note that adding or removing AP codes on the vendor record is not going to have any effect on any of the invoices or payments that are already out there. So let's take a look at how we update the invoices and payments. Before making any corrections to your AP codes on invoices, you're first going to want to see if that invoice is outstanding or if it's paid. If the invoices are outstanding, you only need to correct the AP code on the invoice, because the invoice, when it is paid, the AP code will then flow through to the payment. So you don't have to worry about that. However, if the invoice is already paid, then you will need to update the AP code on the payment as well. So even though the AP code on the payment is the basis for the 1099 reporting, and technically you can just update your payment with the AP code, we highly recommend that you update both the invoice and the payment record at the same time so they match. After you've made all of your corrections, you can rerun your 1099 GL detail report to review and make sure that everything is correct. So now let's take a look at a couple of options that you can use for making corrections. I'm going to give a couple of scenarios. So our first one is that we had a vendor named Roberts and we did not have an AP code set on their record. So all of their invoices and payments for the year 2025 are not flagged as reportable for 1099. I've already updated the defaults tab on the vendor with the appropriate AP code, which in this case would be NEC or non-employee compensation. But now the next step is to update all of their invoices and payments with the new AP code. We're first going to update the invoices. So here we're looking at the invoices tab on our vendor, and I've used a filter to look at this year's invoices, and I've added the column called a non-employee basis to the view. you can see that the basis is empty, so it hasn't been updated with the new AP codes. And it's very simple to update. All you're going to do is select all of the invoices that require the change, right click, and then select Update AP Codes. In the Update Invoice AP Codes form, you're going to want to check mark Add AP Codes that are on the vendor but not on the invoice, and update the payment reporting AP codes. Then click Next and Finished. And just like that, your invoices have been updated to include the AP code for the non-employee compensation. Since these invoices were already paid, we now have to repeat this process for the payments. With the vendor records still open, you can click on the Payments tab and filter the data to show only the payments for this year. Notice the NEC basis for these payments is not yet updated. Then you'll select all of the payments that need to be updated, right-click, and select Update AP Codes, just like you did for the invoices in the previous slide. You're going to want to check mark Add AP Codes that are on the invoice but not on the payment, as well as Update Payment Reporting AP Codes, and click Next and Finished. Now, all of your payments have been updated and will be included on your 1099 reporting. So now on to our last scenario. Let's look at a situation where maybe you don't want to report the entire invoice total as reportable because only a portion of it is. So here I have an outstanding invoice with a total of $25,000, but we know that only $20,000 is going to be reportable. So I'm going to manually change the reportable amount on the AP code basis field to the $20,000. Then when the $25,000 payment for the invoice is processed, the reportable basis amount of $20,000 on the invoice will be copied over to the payments AP code basis. So remember, if you change the invoice that you've changed has already been paid, then you'll also need to manually update the AP code basis on the payment record for reportable as well. Okay, so let's move right along to processing and filing your 1099. What do we need to do first to prepare? If you're e-filing, you must have a transmitter control code, as Elizabeth has already mentioned, and you also need access to the fire system. So again, this is the last year that the fire system will be used, and we are already working on getting our system updated so that we'll be ready to go for next year when we start filing through IRIS. The fire website is currently down for their annual end of year updates, and they will be back up and running on January 6th, so just keep that in mind. And then finally, make sure that you have the correct forms for printing. So remember that the recipients and vendors, you can use blank paper or the pre-printed forms for their copies, but make sure you have pre-printed forms if you are mailing directly to the IRS, because they are not going to accept any forms that are printed on blank paper. Also, you're going to want to make sure that you have the correct envelopes for mailing, which are for the 1099s are going to be the DWMRS envelopes. And I'll have that listed here in just a minute. Okay, so I'm going to go through these steps really quickly just because we have a lot of payroll stuff to get through as well. So I just wanted to point out that you can go to our online help and search end of year guidelines for 2025. And then under 1099 frequently asked questions, we have an easy to follow guide that will walk you through the 1099 generating process that I'm about to walk through. So if you miss anything right now, you can go to our help text and get that step-by-step guide as well. So to start this process, you're going to right-click on the vendors folder under accounts payable and click on the select and generate 1099s. You'll see this form option and you will see that the steps are listed on the left. On the options tab, you're going to fill out everything that is bold plus any other fields that you might need, like state ID, if that's required by your state. And then if this is your first time generating 1099s, then after you fill out this window with all of your information and check all of your appropriate boxes, you should create a saved answer. So that way you don't have to fill out this information again next year.
Saved answers are our friends.
Yes, we like them during this process. Here you can mark the disregard minimum thresholds if you want to create forms for every vendor with payments, even if they're less than the reporting amount. The vendor account prefix affects only those vendors that have the separate 1099 form checked on their vendor record. And the text entered here will prepend to the vendor account code that prints in the account number box on the 1099 form, and a separate 1099 will be created for each vendor with the same tax ID number. The third step is printing the 1099 forms for your vendors. So copy B forms for your vendors or recipients can be printed on blank paper. To do this, you would use the form design copy B blank paper. This will print all of the graphics and then all the graphics for you, and then you're going to use the DWMRS envelopes to mail those forms to your recipients. And here's an example of what that form looks like when it's printed on the blank paper. You notice that it has all of the boxes and all of the information there. So even though there are separate forms for your non-employee compensation and for your 1099 miss, you can print both of those types at the same time since they're on blank paper. So that can kind of save you a step. However, if you're using pre-printed forms, then note that the NEC forms will come 3 to a page and the 1099 miss will come to 2 to a page. So you would then select on the form design option copies A, B, and C pre-printed forms if you're using pre-printed forms. Copy B is the vendor's copy. So just notice in the screenshot to the right that shows what will print from ActivityHD for 1099 NEC. And there are no graphics or anything because that's already on the pre-printed forms that you have. If you're paper filing your 1099s to the IRS, then you are also going to need to fill out by hand the 1096 transmittal form. So keep that in mind as well. So we're now on to the fourth step. This is where you will create 1099 records and attach attachments for each vendor. To create attachments, you will check the Create Attachments box. Here, the design should say 2025 1099 forms copy B, so make sure it's not the 2024. It should populate to the 2025. And next, you can view the 1099 records that you just created. From here, you can review the 1099 records for each vendor. You can open the record to view the form attachments as well. And now we're moving on to our final, or our next step, which is to actually create the transmission file that you're going to upload. So this is what we are creating to send to the IRS. Make sure you specify a file path and fill out all of the transmitter information. The transmission file will automatically be created and saved to that specified location when you click next. So make sure you remember where you're saving it to so that you can retrieve it later. This is another place that you're going to want to save your answers if you haven't done so already. So that way it'll save you some time next year. Click next to view the transmission and finish once complete. You can now find your 1099 transmission records under the government folder in accounts payable. On the transmission record, you'll want to add a few things. File name, which is assigned by the fire system. You also need to add the date that it was received. And you're going to want to add the file status. You can either choose not yet processed, good, or bad. The filing status options are very important if you need to submit a new file for corrections later. The status will have to match the current status in the fire system. So in this fire system, it'll either be good, which means the file has either been released or pending release. Bad means the file contained errors, which must be corrected and then resubmitted as a replacement. And not yet processed means the file has been received, but the results are not yet available. And those are all of your steps for generating your 1099s. Yay. Woo. Okay. But what if you have corrections? So let's just discuss that real quick. If you find an error in your reported amounts for a vendor, here's what you should do. First, you need to fix the AP code amount on the invoices and the payments for that vendor. Then double check the status on the original transmission record in ActivityHD that it matches what your status is in the fire system. Then go to the vendor folder, right click and select Generate 1099s to start the process, just like we've already done. And then on the Specify Options step, you're going to go to the Selections tab and select the vendor or vendors that you need corrections on. And then just make sure that
Uh-oh. Whoa, we went way too far. Hold on. We got to get back.
That was crazy. No. Here we go. That was crazy. I don't know how it skipped so far. Go on the Specify Options step, go to the Selections tab and select the vendor or vendors that need corrections. Make sure the option tab is filled in and then go through all of the steps we originally covered and use your saved answers. After completing the Generate 1099 process, again, you're going to find your original 1099 record on that vendor as well as the correcting record. You're going to print and send the vendor the corrected 1099 and submit the corrected transmission file and 1096 to the IRS. The transmission file for the correction should just contain that one vendor that you're correcting, not everybody again. And that's it. I don't know how we skipped through all the way to several slides, but I think at this point I just need to turn it over to you. So I'm going to go ahead and let Elizabeth talk about payroll year-end processing now.
All right. Thank you, Stephanie. I know that's a lot of information. This whole webinar is a lot of information. So now we're going to go ahead and switch over to W-2s. So like Stephanie, I like to start my end of year process in the help text. So in case you didn't know, you can click F1 from anywhere in ActivityHD, and it's going to open up the help text. In the search bar, I go straight up to the search bar and type in end of year. Scroll down to 2025 year-end guidelines, and that's going to give you all of those end-of-year nuggets of information, including 1099s. They're going to be first, and then you have to scroll down to W-2s. This screenshot right here from the help text is just giving you all the important facts regarding electronic filing, along with all of the links you need that's going to take you to the business services online and how to register. But lastly, please know that our team has already started working on a schedule for your end of year ActivityHD update. You're going to need to be on version 9.16-1 or later to have all of the newest end of year updates and export controls. We anticipate that our year-end release will be available to you after the 22nd of December. If you're on Aspire, you're going to automatically be updated. But for anyone else at that point, we're going to start contacting each of you to get on that schedule. And with that update, we're going to supply you with your export controls and everything that you need to file your returns. I believe that Liz on our support team is the one handling all of our update schedules this year. So stay tuned for emails from Liz Carrasco coming soon. So every year, I like for you to go through and verify that all of your information is still correct. I want you to review your export employers, review your export submitters, your address, and your tax ID. And yeah, I mean, unless you specifically changed any of this, it should all be correct. But you know, these computers, they sometimes have a mind of their own. But so it shouldn't take you more than 5 minutes. Just double check them and make sure that that's done. Going down. No, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so the next thing that I want you to do, the bigger job here, is to review your groups. Now, when you went through your initial implementation, we set up all of your segment items in groups and did our best to assign those accurately to the payroll codes you had then. However, every year we suggest you take time to review these just to make sure all the appropriate groups are still assigned correctly, because this is the information that drives that W-2 data and reporting. And we all know that PR codes, they can be added throughout the year, they can be changed throughout the year. So it's just a good idea to make sure that nothing accidentally slipped through any of those cracks. Specifically, the groups that I want you to pay attention to more are listed right here. We do our best to catch all of the groups that affect your calculations, but it can sometimes be easy to miss those groups that feed directly into box 14, which is where the information for like your retirement plans and your employer-sponsored health plans, and this year, this is where that one big beautiful bill information is going to go as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that here more in a bit, but keep in mind that while you're looking at these, if you do notice for some reason you find a segment item missing from any of your groups, I want you to go ahead and add them. Just be sure to review those prior calculated checks and taxes and then create any necessary correcting checks. Then I want you to go ahead and make any additional tax payments that could have now been due because of those changes. And then I want you to file your amended 941 form. More than anything, I just want to make sure that your 941s and your W-2s are all going to be matchy-matchy at the end of the year. I like to, for a little tip from me, I like to wait and file my fourth quarter 941 after I have finished my W-2s so that I can add up all 4 quarters and make sure that they all match before I submit my W-3 file. Those two things not matching, that's what causes red flags with the IRS, and we don't like.
We don't need that. Nope.
Okay, so before you process your W-2s, you're going to want to make sure that you verify your taxable wages. We've got 2 methods to help you determine if there might be any problems with your wages or taxes before we get on to processing W-2s. So the first is going to be an export control that builds an Excel spreadsheet that you can review, and then the other is going to be a filter located in the checks folder. If this is your first time running W-2s through ActivityHD though, it's possible you might not have these set up already, and that's okay. So if you're working through this and you're not seeing these, reach out at that point, let us know, and the support team will get you set up and hooked up for that. All right, let's talk about the taxable wages export control first. So to run this, it's as simple as right-clicking on the employees folder and choosing select and create a totals file. Very similar to 1099s, except we're in employees now. This is going to result in this dialog window. You should have taxable wages as a saved answer. So I want you to pull down that saved answer and select it. But here is where, if this is your first time doing it, doing W-2s in ActivityHD, and you don't have something called taxable wages as a saved answer, stop and let us know and we'll get that added for you. More than likely, if you don't have that saved answer, you probably don't have the export control yet either, and you're going to have both of those in order to get going. But that's an easy fix, so just let us know. If you do have the saved answer, then all that we're going to do here is to start running your file. Just note that you do need to have a .csv extension so that this is going to open up an Excel document. And then we want to update your dates to 1/1/2025 and then 12/31/2025 for your end date. And then you're ready to click Create File. Once that's saved, you're going to open your file back where you told it to save, and we're going to see this. So you're going to have a report that shows totals per employee for the entire year. This is where those group assignments come into play that we talked about earlier. The grouped calculated number is then compared to what actually on your payroll checks. Across the sheet though, then you're going to see your tax calculation for USA and then for states as if that applies to you. And then further down, we're going to see comparisons for Medicare and Social Security over to the right. So this is your checkpoint. Let's say you created correction checks throughout the year, somewhere down the line, and something got overwritten. This is going to catch any inconsistencies that we need to adjust before you're ready to file your W-2s. So what you're looking for here are zeros in the columns labeled differences. This is signifying that the calculations, what the calculations came out to versus what was actually processed and is on your merged checks. If you don't see zeros, then you know you need to start looking into some kind of issue. Sometimes it may be that you know exactly what that difference is, and it might be completely legitimate, but if you don't know what it is, you're going to want to stop and review and then correct anything there before you're ready to process your W-2s. Well, let me tell you, it's a happy day when you run this report and you see those zeros. So if any of you had a chance to watch the summer series webinar with Brett and me this last August, this is one of those items that he suggested that you run throughout the year. You don't have to wait until the end of the year to do this. In fact, you can catch these errors before you even process your 941s if you do it on a quarterly basis. And then by the time you get to year end, you've already fixed them, and hopefully you don't have to do 941Xs and amend any of those. So just some food for thought there. Okay, next on our list is using the Verify Taxable Wages filter on the checks folder. We normally call it like Verify Tax or Verify USA Taxable Wages. Once again, if you don't see something in your filter list to that effect, reach out to support. We'll be glad to get that set up for you. But let's take a look at how those work. So here's a window right here showing one of the Verify filters enabled for this year's checks. So what we're looking for here, actually, we're looking for nothing. An empty HD pane is exactly what you're looking for, as this filter is specifically designed to only show you issues, to show you all the problems that could be there. But if you do have something come up on this filter and you're not sure how to fix it, just let us know. We can help walk you through it. But you should be able to just click on the check right here, open it up, and you know that there's something within that check that we need to look at. It's kind of finding that needle in the haystack. Okay, before we jump into W-2 processes, now's a good time to talk about forms and envelopes. I've attached a snapshot here of our help text just so you know where you can find the form and envelope type. But honestly, along with making sure that you've got your login information to the BSO ready to transmit electronically, ordering your forms and envelopes is the other thing that you can do right now to prepare for January. And believe me, I've been this chicken before. And there's nothing worse than waiting too long and realizing everyone is sold out or you can't get them shipped to you fast enough. So just get them ordered and mark that off your list. You'll be glad you did. You're going to need the L4BL blank 4-up forms. These are the ones that come with the pre-printed instructions on the back. And then your envelopes, those are going to need to be the DW-4S type envelopes. So you can just put those in your search bar wherever you're buying them and you should find them. So let's move into generating the W-2s. Here's a quick screenshot from the help text that's going to walk you through that generation process and printing your W-2s. We suggest testing your EFW2 file with ActivityHD before submitting the final file with BSO. ActivityHD is a W-2 test system inside the BSO that's going to kick back any issues that you may have with your employees' data. It's going to review your employees' social security numbers, their addresses, zip codes, just to make sure everything that you have entered into ActivityHD is still correct. And you do this because, I mean, obviously we don't know your employees' information and there's no way for ActivityHD to know all of that information, but you'd be surprised how many times maybe a social security number got keyed in wrong, a zip code could be missing digits, who knows, anything could be left out. So by submitting your file to ActivityHD first, then fix any errors that they kick back to you, then hopefully you'll avoid having to create any W-2Cs after your submission is in the accepted status. So this is just another checkpoint to help you avoid unnecessary errors. Okay, these steps are pretty easy to follow as ActivityHD kind of gives you a little wizard to walk you through the process of generating your W-2s. Similar to 1099, the hard work is the pre-work. So the process is going to take you from generating your data to printing and attaching to self-serve as well as your employee records and then creating your W-3. Okay, so to start, we're going to right-click on employees, click on select and generate W-2s. This dialog box right here is going to open and you're going to need to select options. Enter in your January 2025 to December 2025 dates. And then I told you earlier, we're going to talk about box 14, and this is where we're going to do that. So maintain other amounts button is going to allow you to add information to box 14 on your W-4 forms. And box 14 is the box for employee information only. The IRS really doesn't care what you put in this box. They don't monitor it. This is going to be where you add information that groups from groups like your retirement plans, maybe your ACA health plan information, the totals for the One Big Beautiful Bill. This is where we're going to put it. It's going to take that calculation from groups and it's going to just sum it up and put it in one pretty spot on your W-2. Next is where you're going to print your W-2s. I like to start by just printing one page and make sure you have your paper in the printer correctly. Then once you know you have your paper loaded, then you're set and you're ready to print the rest of your forms. So, for those of you who use Activity Self-Serve, you might not be printing forms, but you still have to click preview right here in order to continue to the next window. So just as a reminder, if you are sending your forms out electronically, like on self-serve, you do need to get your employees' consent from the employee themselves to put their W-2 online electronically. If you don't have their consent, then you still have to send out a paper W-2 to your employees. It might still be posted to self-serve, but you still have to send a paper one. So the next window is going to be where you print the W-3 report, but to be completely honest, most people don't bother doing this because the W-3 is going to automatically show up later in another dialog window. So once you're sure that they're ready to go out, you're going to click yes. And if you use self-serve, then the W-2s now immediately become visible to your employees. This step is also going to automatically attach the PDF W-2s to the employee record, and that's it. They're distributed. However, if you do plan to mail your W-2s, you can choose the date that you want to mail them. If you load them to self-serve, just choose T for today and click yes. If you do need to reprint any W-2s later in the year, then you can find them under records in their specific employee folder or in the records subfolder under employees and then records and then W-2s. So this last window here is where you create the note inside activity for that W-3 report. And once you're finished with this step, your W-3 record is going to be available for easy view after your W-2 process is complete, and it's going to be located under the government file with a subfolder called W-3s. All right, now we're ready to create that electronic file and send it to the IRS. So just remember that you have to be on version 9.16-1 or later, and you have to have the 2025 EFW2 export control to proceed from here. So if you've gotten this far and you're still not there and it's still not available to you, stop and let us know and we'll take care of that for you. Okay. Last time, just like all the other files we've done, we're going to right click on employees, but this time you're going to select and create totals file, not W-2s. You've probably have a saved answer for W-2 electronic file in your dialog box. And then you're just going to need that 2025 export control to do that. Again, if you don't have that saved answer, let us know. Once this file is generated, we're going to log on to the Business Services Online with your user ID that you just did and upload your file to AccuAge to check for errors. Once you get the all clear, then you're ready to submit your file. Okay, that's it. Let's transition over to Canada for just a few moments. The T4 last year, it accounted for those changes to your Canada's pension plan. So that is already set up and ready for you. Everything else should be very similar to years past. Just as a reminder though, last year that transmitter account number or transmitter rep ID used to sign in for transmittal is now required when you create your file. So now the existing prompt for the transmitter number is replaced with prompts for each of these. The transmitter account number expects a business number. If one of these is not applicable for your company, then just leave it blank in the dialog box. Then to create your T4 file, you're going to have the similar setup as we just went over with W-2s, except yours is going to say T4s. You're going to right click on the employees folder, choose select and create totals file. Make sure that you use a .xml ending for your output file. and make sure you have the export control CAN 2025 T4. Answer the remaining questions that it gives you, including those on the additional options tab. And then you can always see the help text, prepare electronic T4 slips for any additional guidance, or reach out to support and we'll walk you through it. Okay, that was everything about W-2s and T4s. So let's talk really quick about 940s and 1095s. I know we have just a little bit more time. So we want to quickly mention that you can generate your 940 return from ActivityHD, and the instructions are super well documented in our ActivityHD help. You're just going to want to expand this article right here to get a complete information on your generation, and then expand this article to help you print that 940 form. And then as a reminder for those of you who issue 1095Cs from ActivityHD, start now reviewing your ACA monthly operations dashboard, just to see if there's anything that hasn't been done yet. Hopefully you've had time to monitor this throughout the year and you've been able to take care of adding all those ACA designation records on a monthly basis. Several customers of ours, though, use the new rehire workbook, and we've added that step into your workbook. That ACA designation, anytime there's a change or something, it'll create that designation for you. So if you don't have that step in your new hire workbook and you'd like for that to just come off of your plate of things you have to remember to do, let us know. It is going to be a small billable task for that, but it's something that I think could take a lot of time off of your hands. Another step that can be done throughout the year is processing each ACA calendar period on a monthly basis. That's going to create those result records throughout the year instead of you having to remember what happened 9 months ago. If you have all those steps done and you're ready to run your 1095C proof report for the year 2025, just review it. And then the next step is going to be to generate your 1095Cs, get those out to the employees, create your transmission file, and then submit that to the IRS. To do this, you're going to follow the same steps we just went through for W-2, but instead select ACA processing and toggle through the menu accordingly. You're also going to need to make sure that you have your planned start month set on your ACA categories, because this needs to show on your 1095C. So to get there, you just need to browse to your payroll setup folder and then to the ACA categories folder, find all the categories that are on your system, open each one of them, and then assign the correct start month. You might find that you only have one ACA category, and that's totally fine. But if you do have multiple, you'll just need to make sure that you look at all of them. As always, if you have additional questions or need assistance, ActivityHD help is very thorough, specifically on the ACA reporting. But after reviewing that information, if you still need help or training, reach out, let us know, and we'll get that taken care of for you. If your company is new to Activity Payroll and you want to start using the ACA system and it's not set up for you yet, contact us and we'll get an implementation on the books for you and some training on there, and we'll get that all set up.
All right.
I think that's it.
Well, with that, we will move into our wrap up. I think we've used up just about most of our time. So if you haven't had a chance yet to submit your questions, now's your final chance. We just have a couple more slides. So let's see what we have. A few announcements. Don't forget that when you close out, you will be prompted with a survey. So please fill that out and leave us some feedback. Here's a cute picture of Elizabeth and I from our holiday party.
Yes.
And then, as promised, a little picture of the inside of our new building. This is from our lobby. It's a beautiful view. So thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you really enjoyed this webinar. And from the Accountingware family, from our Accountingware family to yours, we hope you have a safe and happy holiday. We will see you in 2026.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.